I've seen a lot of cool buildings in my day that were net zero with a big solar array, and of course this building has that. But we're going one step beyond here at the Current Center at Hampshire College. They get all their water from the sky in some rainwater tanks. It's treated here at this rainwater treatment center. And then, check this out, there's no sewer connection on this building. The gray water comes here, and they have a fascinating system to treat that gray water and actually use it here at the building. But the coup de grace, the system that just is absolutely crazy, is this right here. This is their composting toilets. These two big black tanks take everything that comes from the toilets above and turn it into mulch. On the Build Show today, we're going to take a deep dive into how all these systems work and see maybe if these might be in your future buildings. Today's Build Show, sponsored by Hampshire College. Let's get going. Something we do in our homes every day, we kind of take it for granted, right? Wash our hands in the sink, the water goes down the drain, it disappears, we never really think about where it goes. But in this building, they've really thought about where it goes. Now the sink is your gray water, but more interesting, your toilets are your black water. I'm here with Sarah Draper. We actually toured this building in a previous episode. We'll link in that in the description. Sarah's the sustainability director here at Hampshire College. And Sarah, talk to me about gray and black water and how this works in this building.
Yeah, so I'm really glad that you brought up this gray water and this black water. So this is kind of our wastewater story here at the Current Center. And these two systems really work together to make our net zero water system possible. So like you were saying, our gray water here, we're washing our hands, that soap and any water residue going down the drain into a big tank in the basement, and we can go check that out in a bit. And then using plants in the building to treat that water. So we're collecting and treating gray water right on site, no sewer connection.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah, so the only reason we can do this is because of these.
All right, so this is what I think of when I think of like national parks or some other location.
The old outhouse.
Yeah, this is basically a direct connection to those big black tanks we saw downstairs.
Exactly.
When you open the lid, you're in effect looking down the septic tank, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can see some deposits down there right now. So this is our composting toilet system. And you'll notice, you know, there's not really a bowl, there's no water in there. It's what we call a direct drop dry composting toilet system. Direct
drop, meaning a tube straight down.
Straight down.
Dry, meaning there's no flush.
Exactly. Nothing to do here. And what you'll also see, I don't know if you can smell anything while you're standing in the bathroom here.
I don't, which is weird. I would expect that you would, I mean, anytime I've ever been in a construction outhouse, it smells bad.
Right. That's not the vibe we're going for.
So how have you engineered out the smell?
Yeah. So if you listen closely, you can actually hear like the faint hum of a fan. So this is constantly negatively pressure ventilated. So we're pulling air from the bathroom down through the toilet and into the composting unit downstairs, and then we're exhausting that air straight up and out.
So there's no exhaust fan in the ceiling, it's actually exhausting through the toilet, and that's why we're not smelling anything, because everything's always going the other direction.
Yes, and that greatly confused the building inspector for a moment, I will tell you, when we first opened.
That's wild.
Yeah.
All right, now to understand these systems though, I think we gotta go into the basement. This is a 3-story building, and we talked earlier before we started the video that the engineers, the architects, when they designed this building, had to think about placement, right? Because you can't just willy-nilly put a toilet anywhere if you need that direct drop.
Exactly.
And the basement's actually kind of small in this building. It's not very big. So let's get into the basement and let's talk about how these systems work. Sarah, these big black boxes, these are crazy. Talk me through this. I'm assuming the green tube that we're seeing here that looks like it's going through the floor, that's probably connected to the toilet above. But how does this composter work?
Yeah, so you're right. We're in the basement. We're hanging out with our two big composting units. These green pipes are leading straight from those toilets, so you can see three on each coming from the first and second floor.
So this one services 3 toilets.
Yeah, all on one side of the hallway. So one side of the hallway and the other side.
Okay.
And then all that raw human waste and some exciting toilet paper are going into the top part.
So you're using, I'm sorry to be crude, but like you're using this like a regular toilet, right? This is poop and pee and toilet paper that all comes down the chute, right?
Yes.
Just like an outhouse would.
And pee and hopefully nothing else.
Right.
Don't drop your phone.
Definitely don't drop your phone. All right, so that comes down the tube, and then what happens?
Yeah, so it's going into the top part of the composter here. So up here we have that human waste, and then we add sawdust about once a week. And that's just to kind of balance out the chemical components of the compost, also helps soak up some extra liquid. If you think about, we have that organic matter from the human waste, and we want to add some kind of high carbon wood chip kind of content. And together that gives us our compost blend.
Okay, wild. So just once a week, a little sawdust in there.
Yep.
And then I'm noticing that it's kind of, there's this weird slant going on. What's going on with the slantedness here?
Yeah, so these are designed, and yeah, exactly. It's kind of sloping from the back down towards the front. So that is allowing that compost to slowly work its way down and forward. So the stuff that was down here at the bottom and the front is the oldest stuff. And that way when we go and open this, this is compost that has been in here the longest. And if you take a look, you can see it's kind of mulchy, earthy looking.
And it's not stinky.
Yeah, it smells kind of like wood chippy, earthy.
Yeah.
Again, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of does. All right, so composter pump, what does that do?
Yeah, so you'll notice this is pretty dry. And obviously there is a lot of urine going in upstairs. So this is pulling off all of that urine. And at this point, we'll call it leachate. It's leached all the way down through the compost mass.
Okay.
And we're going to draw it off here to keep this nice and dry. And that actually goes to a different tank. So we're kind of separating it out here, partially because we're allowed to use this as fertilizer on campus. But the leachate we're not yet allowed to use. So we're going to treat that differently.
Okay, so this is like a sump pump, which is at the lowest portion of the tank as everything filters down.
Yep.
And then this tube here is where that sump pump goes and dumps it into this tank right here.
Yeah. So if you check out over here, this is our big liquid tank number 1. You can see we've got some good liquid deposits going on here. This leachate is pumped out about 4 times a year.
Huh. And you've got a very sensitive marker with a line,
yes.
with a Sharpie line.
Put here by our
Full call to
facilities
empty.
crew. We want to call before it becomes problematic.
I love how you've labeled these perfectly: sanitary waste and liquid tank, and then a Sharpie. Call me to empty.
This is how we learn when we have these kinds of systems, right? There's the things that we thought of, and then there's the things that we didn't think of until we started operating.
So 4 times a year this gets emptied.
Yes.
How often are you emptying these black tanks?
Yeah, so that's kind of the kicker. We haven't actually emptied the composting tanks at all since we've opened yet.
And this is 5 years ago, right, that you built this building?
It's a long time, yeah.
So
I mean, part of it is a lot of the volume is in the liquid form, right?
Yeah.
So we're pulling that off. And then part of it is it's breaking down over time and literally breaking down into smaller and smaller components.
Wow, that's wild. It's relatively simple, really. There's not a whole lot to it, and it doesn't smell down here either.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
It's a cool system.
And I guess you mentioned it, but you can see those inline fans that are taking that air and popping it through the roof. So it could, in theory, smell on the roof, right? Just like your open drain waste vent lines on a house.
Right. Anywhere we're exhausting waste air, we have that potential. I will share with you one thing we have learned over the course of operating this building. We have an energy recovery ventilation system in this building where we recapture heat from our exhaust air.
Yep.
We were originally trying to recapture that nice toasty heat from the compost ventilation. We have stopped doing that and kind of rerouted the system because there was a little bit of odor contamination.
Cross smell contamination, yeah, I can see that.
So not worth it, not worth the heat capture.
Shockingly simple.
Yes.
Now, over here, this small system, though, takes us to gray water, right? So that's the black water, that's toilets.
Yep.
But all your sinks, showers, what else would be gray water? Anything
espresso
else?
drain.
Espresso drain.
Dishwasher up in the cafe.
Okay.
Yeah, that is all coming here to our gray water system. And the thing that I really want to point out is like this system only works because we have that composting toilet system.
Right.
Otherwise, we'd have to deal with black water in the building and we'd essentially become a sewage treatment plant. But because we have those composting toilets, our gray water treatment.
Meaning if you had like a flushing toilet, right? They would mix the two, the gray and the black, but they're separate.
Yes.
So now all you have is this beautiful copper pipe that says gray water and it dumps it in here. Now, how's this system work?
Yeah, so exactly as you said, this copper pipe leading down here, all the water that we use in the building is coming down at first into this tank number 1. So if you take a look in here, this is our raw gray water, right? So
it's not very big.
It's not very big.
It seems like a small tank.
We only use maybe 150, 100 gallons of water a day in the whole building.
Oh gosh, small amount of water use.
So we don't need a big tank.
Yeah.
And if you take a look, it's dark gray. I think gray water smells kind of like low tide.
Yeah.
Not awful, but
not
not ideal.
Now what's going on here? This is the actual outlet coming from upstairs, and it appears that there's like a sock filter or something on there. Is that what that is?
Yeah, here, I'll come in and show you.
Okay, please.
We'll swap. So, yeah, our first phase of treatment, or our first filtration, is actually just a little piece of pantyhose.
Is that right?
Clamped on to the end of
Super
this pipe.
high tech.
Basically a little pantyhose sock, and that is doing a great job of catching all of our small, fine particulates.
Okay.
So especially espresso grounds coming from the cafe, really hard to capture that in like a sink drain or something. So that's doing our first bit of treatment, or first bit of filtration, I should say, and then you can see that raw gray water. And then you also see this little pipe here, or pump here. That's going to pump this gray water from here upstairs into a series of planters. So those planters are what are actually doing our microbial chemical treatment of this gray water.
So all the plants in the foyer area that were like ringing the building, those are getting this gray water direct, no additional treatment.
Correct.
And it's a system where you're probably piping that under the soil, right? There's no aeration. There's no sprinkler heads, let's say.
Right. Yep, just some drip tubing.
And so then that drip tubing is taking this pumped water, and the plants, the soil, the roots are doing the biological treatment of this then, right?
Yeah.
That's
we're
wild.
basically borrowing plants to do what they do in nature, which is take up nutrients from the soil and filter water, and we're just having them do it for us in the building.
But that 150 gallons a day the building uses, the plants aren't soaking up 150 gallons a day, are they?
Probably not, which is why we have this tank. So it's like you can use water in the building, it comes down into this tank. When it reaches kind of a critical mass, we'll pump it around to the plants, and when it gets too low, this pump will automatically kick off. So between those three planters, we're just dosing intermittently, so they're not constantly wet all the time, and they're not getting too dry.
And then at the bottom of those planters, is there an outlet to capture whatever's remaining, or after it's been filtered?
Yes, yeah.
And where does that go?
Water's percolating all the way down and through, and coming out at the end of those planters, and that goes to this second
Tank
little box we have down here. Tank 2, correct. So this tank, and if I open the lid, you'll be able to see it's actually much lighter.
Oh yeah, it's a lot clearer.
It's a lot less stinky. So this is the water that's come out of those planters. So you can see the sand has done a really great job of physically filtering it.
Looks great.
It smells a little less funky.
Yeah.
And we actually have kind of an extra backstop on this system. This water gets pumped out. You can see this gray water line, and that actually heads out to another constructed wetland outside. So we have an inside stage of treatment and then an outside stage of treatment.
So in effect, there's no leach field per se. There's no outside septic tank that needs emptied, and there's really no connection to city sewer here.
Right, yeah, there's no away in this building is how I like to put it. So this goes out to that other constructed wetland, and then from there it does go to a leach field, but that water is considered treated and perfectly safe to go back out on site at that point.
That's amazing. And the system's pretty straightforward. I'm seeing some stickers here from this Clivus company. Are they a manufacturer of some of these tanks? Is this a system that you see out in the world?
Yeah, so Clivus did help us with both our composting toilet setup and this setup, and they do help us with that, again, quarterly maintenance on this system. It's pretty simple, as you're saying. We're stockpiling water in tanks, and then we're dosing it around the building. The challenging or interesting part of operating systems like these is that they run on bacteria and microbes and water flowing. So we really do need to be a little bit more in tune with what's going on a microbial level in the building, and I can tell by smell or looking how the system is working. So it's not complicated, it just takes some attention to detail.
And that's where that name, that Living Building Challenge, comes in. We spent a bunch of time in the last video talking about that. Go check that out, including how the rainwater works. But this really is a living building, which means you need the occupants to interact with that living organism, like Sarah's mentioning. There's some amount of cleaning of filters that need done. There's some amount of, this smells different, what's going on, or this smells great. And also, at the end of the line, 5 years later, we get some compost out of there, right?
Yeah, it's cool to have a system that creates a resource instead of creating a waste product like sewage that we then have to figure out, oh, well, what do we do with this? We can say, ooh, what do we want to do with this?
Yeah. Sarah, do you have the golden shovel for the first groundbreaking of the poop tank?
Yeah, I didn't get that prepped this morning, and I apologize.
Sorry about that. You didn't get the memo.
I do have our head of our grounds department, James, here with me to help us with this ceremonial, important moment. This is actually the first time we're ever removing compost from our composting toilet system. You'll see, even since the last time you were here, not a whole lot of accumulation, right?
It looks the same to me, and that's why you've only got 2 5-gallon buckets. You don't need to take wheelbarrows full out of this thing, right?
Yeah, and in the spirit of the living experiment that is the RW Kern Center, this is the first time we're going to take out a few buckets. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to let it age for a few months, let it kind of temper and mellow out. And then we'll be able to use it here on campus, and James and his crew will be able to use it wherever we need some fertilizer or mulch on campus.
That's so cool. Sarah, pretty amazing tour of this net zero water building.
Yeah, and this is actually a really great place to finish it up. We are standing right now on the leach field, which is the last stop of the path of water through the building. This is where that treated gray water gets back into the ground.
Got it. Man, pretty cool. Now, Sarah, when we look at this building, this RW Kern Center, this is an active campus building. But I'm thinking, as I think about this building and these net zero systems, this isn't a dorm room. This isn't a single family. What would change in your mind if someone were to take these things that you guys have done here and adopt them for a different kind of use, a more domestic use, so to speak?
Yeah, so as we talked about, this is a whole interconnected system. So the kind of water balance equation would just change based on the use. So for us, we have a super low water use. We're not taking showers in here.
Right.
We're not doing a ton of laundry. In a domestic situation, you'd probably have a lot more gray water use, but maybe a lot less stuff going into the composting toilet.
Yeah.
So you might need or get away with a smaller composting toilet system, but you might have more gray water. And in that kind of system especially, or perhaps if you had a house with a gray water system but no composting toilets, you might consider gray water recycling instead, where you're using gray water to flush toilets and things like that, instead of just putting it back out on site.
That makes sense. And Sarah, as we close this out, is there any way to talk about cost of these systems? I know this is a hard question to answer, but someone who's watching this who may really be interested in doing something like this, can you give them any guideline or any rails on that?
Yeah, so it really depends on the size of the system, right? And it also depends on what kind of costs would you be expecting for a conventional system in your area.
That's right.
So if you're on a site where perhaps a septic system isn't possible, the upfront cost of putting a composting toilet in might start to look more attractive.
Yeah.
And the big thing is it also depends on sewer and water rates in your area.
That's a great
if you were perhaps going to run on a well or be totally off-grid, you might not look at a system like this. If you're in an area with super high sewer rates, doing your own in-house treatment, again, can start to look more attractive.
I think that's a really good point. I know that in the past there have been some sites that I've built on that didn't have city services, that maybe also had some environmental issues, or they were bordering something, so they couldn't do traditional septic, which meant they had to go to aerobic or some other more expensive system. And all of a sudden, the maybe $10,000 to $15,000 for a traditional septic doubled or tripled or more in cost. All of a sudden, this looks like it might be a pretty economical choice. That's pretty interesting to think about.
Yeah, the other thing to think about from a cost perspective is maintenance, right? So for our composting toilet system, the real inputs that we're putting in are just the cost of sawdust for the year, so a couple $100s. We also happen to have a maintenance contract so that we get some additional help with this because it's a new system. And again, that's running us maybe $2,000 a year.
Okay.
If we were doing this, if I was doing this in my own house, I probably wouldn't be paying someone to maintain it. And again, that sawdust cost would be much lower. So from an ongoing maintenance perspective, it's really pretty cost competitive.
It's pretty interesting. How can people find out more about the RW Kern Center? And is this building ever open for tours if people are in Massachusetts?
Yes. So whether you're in Massachusetts or not, we do in-person tours. I've done a ton of virtual tours. And if you head to the RW Kern Center website, this is the RW Kern Center at Hampshire College, You'll find a ton of info on there, and I'm always happy to give tours and help people learn more about sustainable building techniques.
Well done, Sarah. Amazing building. I'll have links to all that stuff we talked about. And don't forget, we have another video we made that's much longer, talking about the full history and the systems that were used in this building. But hopefully you enjoyed something on the deep dive on the septic. There's definitely a poop joke in here somewhere, but I'm gonna let that go. Comment below on your favorite poop joke from today's video, because there's gotta be some good ones in there. If you're not following The Build Show, guys, we publish every Tuesday and every Friday. By the way, sign up for our newsletter. I have 10 new videos a week for you over on buildshownetwork.com. Tons of great building science. We're really dedicated to teaching people how to build better, more efficient, more durable, more healthy, and maybe even net zero water buildings as well. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, otherwise we'll see you next time on The Build Show.